My name is Don Eldon Fadler, born at Patton, Missouri on 7/24/29, 85 years old, coming up. I really think that I had a first cousin that lived in St. Louis, and his name was Donald. And believe it or not, my birth certificate says Donald Fadler. And I was named from him. That was my first cousin and Mom's brother that lived in St. Louis. And my my middle name was Eldon. And there was an Eldon Yamlitz that died just a few months ago, and he was about 3 or 4 years older than I. And I know they give me that name Eldon in between there because it was within the family tree of Eldon Yamlitz. My name is Don Eldon Fadler. But the birth certificate actually says Donald, but I've always gone with Don.
So did you have any nicknames growing up?
Yeah, I had Cotton, because as a little boy, didn't wear no straw hat or anything, and my hair, I have old pictures, my hair was solid white, and the sunlight bleached it, you know.
Yeah.
And naturally your hair was growing along, it growed pretty long before Dad would ever cut it. And they cut it with hand clippers. You never heard of hand clippers. I've still got the same hand clippers there today that was used to cut my hair with.
No way.
Yeah. Back them days, the farmers, if they had boys, going to the barber shop was probably 10 cents. They can't afford that 10 cents. So they cut, the daddies cut all the boys' hairs. Didn't do a very good job, but they cut it.
So your dad would let your hair grow longer.
Yeah.
Because, for time and because you didn't have a lot of money.
I know it.
Was it normal? I mean, did you have like a different haircut?
No, it's just, the hair was just, it was so white, it was called cotton. But it never did stick with me, the name Cotton. I got away from it as soon as I could. It didn't mean anything to me. Cotton didn't sound bad. I never minded. But my name, there were some of my old friends, at that era of time, they knew me by Cotton. Well, I never did go for that, so I'm glad I got away from Cotton.
Gotcha. Did you have anything growing, like in your later years, teenage, college, or, early 20s, or any other nickname?
No, that was the only one.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was a pretty big house at that era of time, no electricity and no running water, and it was a nice house. I got a picture of it there at the house, It was a pretty big house, a farmhouse, and comparing it with that era of time with the rest of the neighborhood, it was an outstanding house, really.
And you said no running water?
No running water.
Okay.
No, and no electricity either. Only running water you had is when you run and go get it.
Right. So when did you get a telephone? First of all, when's the first time you had running water and electricity in your house?
At the farm home where I was born and raised, we never had no electricity or running water. The electricity didn't come in that area of the country up there until after World War II. All farm homes did not have electricity. And another thing, we all slept on straw beds. You know what a straw bed is? That's when you have a wheat thrashing and you have new straw and you empty the old straw tick out and put in the new straw. And that's the farmers slept on straw beds and everything until after World War II, and then they started manufacturing mattresses. They would manufacture mattresses at the county seat, which was Bolivar County, and the people could qualify. They could go down there and pick up a mattress.
They could qualify?
If you could qualify, yeah. You naturally had to meet this. Well, if I talk about if poverty qualified, we all qualified.
Yeah.
Poverty then was a lot lower than what poverty is today.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I can't imagine.
But that's another thing. World War II, gasoline was rationed, sugar was rationed, shoes were rationed, tires were rationed, everything was rationed, coffee was rationed even. In order to, now a lot of people don't know this, in order to buy gasoline, you had to have a sticker. And that sticker gave Dad 3 gallons a week. 3 gallons of gasoline is all you could buy in the country, unless you had a different rating for farm tractors or for a truck. For a truck, you had a T sticker. And by the way, I had a T sticker, and a guy offered me $1.50 for it at Patton Junction there, and I didn't sell it the next day. So it was worthless because gas. It was near the end of the war. In fact, the war was over, and the gas rationing ended. And the T sticker that I could have got $1.50 for was worthless the next day. And the stickers that you had was something like a postage stamp. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had to have something like a postage stamp before you could even buy any gasoline. You know, of course, the gasoline was really expensive, 15 cents a gallon. Wow. Dad got 5 gallons of gasoline for $1 at Perryville. 5 gallons, that's 20 cents a gallon. Another thing that's interesting to remember, these gasoline pumps, which still existed then, was a gravity flow. You looked up in a bowl, you looked up in a bowl and it measured it, You say, I want 5 gallons. When you looked up in that bowl, it was a gravity flow.
I remember I've seen that.
And the man had to pump it out of the tank to fill that gas up there in the bowl, so the customer knew when he got 5 gallons, he looked up there, 5 gallons down. Wow. And these high-speed pumps like we're talking about nowadays, as you know, didn't even exist,
Yeah.
Digital reading and
I've seen those on American Pickers. I've seen
yeah,
those
yeah.
old gas stations.
We never had, just a minute, way back, I'm just a kid, and the community there, we had them built their own telephone line out of the switchboard there in Patton, which was sort of a little push-type switchboard. And a telephone line came by our house and ended on up the road. But the people had to maintain it. If the limbs got on it, you had to fix it. And I guess you probably had to run your own wire up there. But we had a telephone. It was a kind where you 3 rings and 2 shorts and 1 long, Yeah. And my brother, if you ring and you start an armature going in there generating electricity, somehow or another he stuck his finger in there or something and it bit him. But anyhow, that telephone there at the house didn't last very long. I remember it, and it was that kind of hangs on the wall. You've seen pictures of them, and you ring so many 2 shorts and 1 long. Everybody had a ring that you made. And the sad part about that, if you received a call, everybody heard the ring. And if they knew what your ring was, they would pick up their phone and listen in.
Who would? Like the operator?
No, other people on the line. When that phone rang, 2 shorts and a long, everybody heard it. But the only person that was supposed to answer it was the people that had 2 shorts and a long. Some with different rings, all 2 shorts, 3 shorts, 1, or a great big 1 long, That's a good question. That's good. I want to tell you something. One of my favorite, and evidently they told me I really threw a fit over, was a little wagon in Perryville there. A little wagon that had dual wheels on it. It was wooden. It had stakes on it, And they tell me that I evidently just threw a fit. Of course, I'm not very old, 6, 7 years old, but that little wagon had dual wheels. I thought that was really something.
Just kind of like a radio flyer type of
But
thing?
it was all wood.
All wood.
All wood. And so anyhow, I love that thing. And Dad made a little house for it, a little garage for that thing.
So you actually ended up getting it?
Yeah, I wound up getting it. But they tell me that they started home. I didn't know this until so many years later. That I liked seeing the wagon in a store window out there in Perryville, and I liked the wagon so much I just threw it a hissy fit. and they had to turn around and go back and get it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did your parents pay? I guess parents paid for it because you're sick. Probably around sick.
Yeah, they paid for it.
You might not have got allowance then.
I don't know the price, but I'm sure that it probably was $3 or $4, maybe.
Yeah. Right.
Just guessing.
Yeah.
Back then. But there again, dollars was a dollar, and that was a lot of money then. Really, really, it was. No, I never got an allowance. No.
Not at all.
Uh-uh.
So you didn't start making money until your first job.
That's about right. Yeah.
How old were you then?
Well, when I went to work out at the shoe factory, or before that.
Yeah, before that, like maybe as a teenager. I mean, did you have a job as a teenager that you actually got paid for? Not like chores around the house.
Well, about the first job I remember, I went to dig some potatoes for a man. He gave me $2 for it. It was a relative, and I remember getting paid $2 for digging those potatoes.
Wow.
Which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember if you spent it or saved it?
Well, I probably spent it.
Obviously, eventually you spent it, but when you started making any type of money, were you already a saver? I heard about you. I mean, you do save money. I've heard about you being cheap and all that. You're kind of famous for that. But were you always like that? Or did you, when you started kind of tasting money, making your own money, did you start like buying everything you saw? I mean, what was that like when you first started making money?
I tell you, I was born in a Depression era of time, and I know this affected me. I didn't know what money was because Dad didn't have no money. See, he had bought our farm in 19 and 20 for $5,600. And then the Depression hit in 29 and all through the 30s.
Yep.
And let me tell you something, you probably got more in your hip pocket than he'd been making a whole year, maybe even more than that. And you wouldn't have to have very much money. There was no money. So what I'm trying to point out is there was no money, so that sent a message to me.
It was drilled inside you.
It was drilled inside.
Yeah.
And when we would go to town, they would have bartering. They bartered, You take some eggs or some cream, and you get so much, and then you bought some flour or sugar. And the merchant figured it out, well, your eggs were so much, you spent so much here. Maybe you had a refund, maybe you owed some.
So was bartering pretty common?
Yes, absolutely. And you would I remember taking wheat to the mill there in Patton, and exchanging it for flour. And by the way, wheat way back in the 30s, I don't know, it probably wasn't worth 25 cents a bushel. Everything got worthless.
You had to have a ton of it.
You had to have a ton of it.
Yeah.
And it was a totally different world there. In exchange for food, and the farmers were lucky. They pretty well growed all their food. We had our milk, had our eggs, had our pork, livestock, and everything. And we butchered hogs, 3 or 4 hogs per year. And of course, half of that went for the people that helped us do it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And we had to have help. But, and for the interest of your tape here, no refrigeration.
Where you put them in the ground? Did you have
salt.
Yeah.
We had a big barrel. We put all of our meat in this barrel, but then you loaded it down with salt, and that was the main way to keep it refrigerated. That was your refrigerator. And
you just stick them in where would you put the barrels?
Well, it was a great big box like. It was really that wide and probably that tall. You would just load it up with your meat in there and throw salt everywhere. But first of all, in some cases, they would smoke it. They hang it up in the smokehouse. They call it the smokehouse over there at Lucas's wedding at Bella Vista, Bellamede. They had a smokehouse there, Well, we did too. And I want to tell you something. There was nothing better in taste than a smoked ham. It did not get any better. And of course, then you had preserved it with your salt. In fact, and you could be eating ham or pork in the middle of the summer and the temperature is 100 degrees. If it wouldn't be salted down, it'd been gone.
Oh yeah.
You know, that was your refrigeration.
I hadn't heard that. I didn't know they just did the salt. I didn't know if y'all had like an ice box type thing. I've heard that before too, but I don't know anything about it.
Well, the chest, I'll draw you another picture of that. It's like a deep freeze that you see with the deep freeze, except ours was just a wooden box.
Wow.
That was our deep freeze. And another thing, when you growed apples or turnips, you would dig a hole in the ground and cover it up with dirt and straw. You know, and that is what you ate on during the wintertime. But you had to dig it deep enough so it wouldn't freeze, and bury it. You buried that stuff in the ground, and it would preserve itself. And of course, I'm sure there was some lawsuits to that, but that's the way it was done.
That was a common way.
That was a common way to do it. Everybody had to do it. Yeah. Yeah, got 3 sisters and 1 brother, and they're all gone.
Okay.
Except me.
Okay.
I had 1 sister that lived to be 100 years old.
She hit 100.
Yeah, she made it to 100.
Let's describe the personalities of your family. So let's start with your mom. So do you remember if you were to describe your mom in one word?
Yeah.
You know,
you want to see that girl right there?
Yeah.
And Donna.
Yeah.
Okay. And Maria. When I add Maria on it, right there was the personality of my mother.
What is that? What is that?
Patient, kind, and gentle, and hardly would ever say a bad word at all, you know. Well, I don't know where she had all of her patience at, because she had enough to vex a saint.
Wow.
Really? Mm-hmm. And those old folks, they worked like slaves, really. Mm-hmm. But Mom would put out a big, big garden. I mean, a monstrous of a garden, you know? Mm-hmm. And as a kid, I didn't realize she worked so hard. You know, here it is. We you know how it is. We know how kids think, you know. Well, I had my share. Mm-hmm. I thought that way too.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to add to that tape there, in the old home place there when we lived at the mill, Mom found a $5 gold piece out there, and I've still got that $5 gold piece.
No way.
And it was made in 1844. And she gave it to me at least 50 years ago. I've had it at least 50 years. And that it was in the garden. She was in the garden there. We lived on the old farm, then we lived what they call the mill place. There are 2 different places. But anyhow, I had an uncle that was a diviner, you know, a water witch and things like that. He come down there one day, and we thought we could find more money. He put a coin, a dime, on the end of a stick, you know, like finding water witching. Okay. And very few people can do it, but he so-called could do it. But anyhow, he found more money out there in the garden. Well, I want to tell you something. My brother and I dug a hole big enough to bury a horse in. Mm-hmm. That's the truth. Wow. We never found enough. No, we didn't go deep enough. Yeah. You know?
How old were you probably?
Oh, my. I was in my 20s at that time. I was married.
So you're older.
At that time, I'm a lot older, yeah.
All right, describe your dad. If you were going to describe a characteristic or his personality or whatever, what would you say?
Well, he's a farmer, he was an organizer, and there again, he had the patience of Job with us kids, you know, and hard worker. I mean, I want to tell you something. They talk about slaves are working hard. I want to tell you something. If you back up far enough, they had to clear that land with muscle and guts, horses and chains. In some cases, we didn't use dynamite, but he had a lot of that land he had to clear. Another thing I want to mention, on that farm, he bought it in 19 and 20, and he only paid the interest on the money till in the early 40s. Couldn't pay nothing on the principal, and the interest was 6%. 6%. He borrowed something like $5,600. And I don't know where they even had enough money to even get a hold of it.
Yeah.
But he got a hold of that land. And 156 acres of land is not very much in today's world, but in that year of time, they all made a living at it. Mm-hmm. You could make a living off it. You can't do it no more. Yeah. But that was the era of time that's gone.
Wasn't regulated.
No, and the land didn't yield 20. You get wheat if you got 20 bushel per the acre. You thought you was doing good. My goodness, they're probably getting a couple of hundred bushel per the acre now.
Yeah. All right. If you were to describe Donna's personality,
yeah.
What would you say?
Just like my mama.
Really? Patient?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
That's where they get it, I guess.
I see. I'll tell you the truth. I see Mom and Donna almost at every solitary turn. That's the truth. And there again, Marie was the same way too. I see her characteristics, the things, how she would handle a given situation. Mom had enough to upset the saints, but she didn't. She kept it under control. But anyhow, that's just the way it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mom was always concerned with the food chain. Well, that's natural. She put out the garden. Us dummies didn't have enough sense. We had to be fed. Yeah. And the cannon, they were canning stuff all the time. That's another thing. Can you imagine firing a wood stove kitchen in the summertime, cooking a meal, preserving pressure cooking of canned food, firing that stove, and it had to be hotter than blazes.
So the house was hot.
The whole house was hot.
Constant, yeah.
Well, yeah. In the summertime, you already got 100-degree temperature outside. You'll be able to fire the cooking stove. You know what you got. And no refrigeration either at that time. Another thing, what a preservative this was. After the dinner was over, put a cover over what food was left, you know. And the flies, if the flies didn't eat it all, you got what was left.
So it's not compared to what it's like today. Like we had some flies out there, but I mean, it's probably a lot different.
Yeah, well, anyhow, we would have a fly driving contest, you know. That's the truth. We had to get sheets, flop the flies out the back door. One man said one time, well, Joe, why are you taking them screens off of your windows out there? Don't you know that keeps the fly out? He said, I know it. I'm taking the screens off so the flies can get out. That's about a lot the way it was. But, yeah. Everybody had the same thing. You live with that environment. That's just the way it was done.
All right, well, describe Kevin. If you were to describe Kevin's personality.
Kevin?
Yeah, if you were to describe Kevin.
Well, I would say more or less he's a lot like his mama, you know, to a certain extent, and he resembles the Walker family because they're kind of tall, a little taller. The Fadler family in general has the tendency to be kind of short. Mm-hmm. You know, that's our tendency. Pearl Harbor. Okay. Because I want to tell you why that impressed me so much. In the fall, before December, I went to school with a young boy, and his name was Junior Harrell. And he said, remember, we're 8 or 9, 10 years old, something like that, just kids. He said, you know there's going to be a war with Japan? I'll never forget that. And I can tell you exactly to this day where we was at. You know, it was at school. And we was out on the schoolyard, and I don't know where he got his information at, but his dad was a preacher and very well read. He evidently picked it up from his dad. His dad was watching world events. If you're an older person, you're watching world events like we are today. We're watching world events. As a kid, we're living in a la-la land, you know. But Junior told me that. I'll never forget it. And it wasn't that a few months later till dead.
Did any of them personally affect your family at that time?
The war?
Yeah, I mean, how did that, obviously the ration.
Well my brother was called into the Navy. He was a Navy veteran, and he was a telegrapher in communication in the Navy. Learned the Morse code, and I don't know how in the world he ever learned that crazy thing. You know how it did dot, and all that. And then had to learn it and copy it and decipher it and receive it and send it. He was on Okinawa. And he was in the Navy, but he was based in communication on Okinawa, and the communicators was surrounded by a bunch of soldiers. As you know, you don't want to lose that communication. He did not fight, but that was his job. And but anyhow, the neighborhood there, yes, we lost a lot of neighbors in that area of the country up there. Our neighbor, this horrible, I was going to tell you, he had a brother named Darrell, and he went in the Army Air Corps, and he was lost over the English Channel. He was top gunner on the B-17, and that was the preacher's son, this junior's dad. So that was the... and also a first cousin. Yes, the World War II touched me. Another thing I remember more than anything else about it, when we'd go to church, when Mom was sitting there worried, you know.
She was sitting there worried? She
was worried, yeah. Because, you know, we're in World War II. He's died. Oh, did you hear about this one? He died. Oh, yeah, he got shot down. He was lost. When the reason she was so much worried about it, my first cousin, her sister's son, Charlie Loberg is what his name was. He was lost in Luzon, over there in the Philippines somewhere. And then you hear about the reports coming back, this one over here, that one over there, everywhere, you know.
What was that like?
Other than Christmas, it was just another day on the farm.
Wow.
I know what.
I mean, birthday cakes, I mean, anything. Like, I mean, or is it just like, hey, happy birthday, and that was about it?
Well, I'm sure they done the best they could, but most important thing that I want to remember and tell you about, you grew up, okay, I'm 14 years old, and they tell me, oh, you got to do the job of a man because all the men are off to the war. Now, the birthday cake's going to play in this. It was on my birthday. I'm 14 years old. So, wheat thrashing rings, this farmer, you have dinner for the thrashing, they will be here at your house for dinner. You know, 25, 30 men. But anyhow, me and another man was the last one to eat at the table. You know? And
because you're kids? Or just because?
No, I was out on the hauling bundles with a team and wagon to the thrash machine. And I didn't know it then, but the man that threw the bundles up to me was my father-in-law and his son. But okay, we're getting ready to eat dinner. And Mom told his family, you're not fixing enough food here today. You're not fixing enough. We were the last to eat. Guess what? There's with the birthday cake. All in the hell I had was a few scraps and a birthday cake on my 14th birthday. And you know what I said? This man told me this later, and it's true. He said, you know what you said? You know what I said? He said, I'll be damned. I said, they can't even feed a working man. You hear that?
Wow.
You can't even feed a working man.
14.
Yeah, 14. But I had been there and done it.
Yeah.
But that's what I remember about birthday. Mom knew it was my birthday. That's the reason she had the birthday cake down there. And I'll never will forget, I looked at that table, and yes, the dishes were practically all empty. We hardly had nothing to eat for dinner but that birthday cake.
So your mom was like, I mean, she made sure.
She made the birthday, and by the way, our houses was just a half a mile apart. When we was thrashing there, and this people were thrashing, we was thrashing out of a big 50-acre field with bundles. You know how that was set up back them days. You went through with a binder, and you cut the wheat, put it in bundles, then put it in shocks, and then you went after that. You put it in, when the thrash machine come through. You went with the bundle wagon, load all those bundled up, take them to the thrash machine, and thrash it.
Any other family traditions? Did y'all have any sort of family tradition that you remember growing up more than any other? Might not have any, but...
Well, I know we had Christmas there.
Anything special about Christmas that you remember that
yeah, but
y'all did every year?
Yeah, we had Christmas, but it was decorated with popcorn and cookies. And this ISIL tinsel, you know. And here's the funny part about that. They go out and cut our own Christmas tree down. But take it in the back room there. Now get this, didn't build a stand for it or anything. Nail the thing to the floor. Hammer and nails.
Wow.
Hammer and nails.
We used to do the, go get our tree. That's what I liked.
Yeah.
We stopped doing it years ago, but we never nailed it to the floor.
Yeah, that was pretty crude. I would say we had a lot of room to,
Wow.
a lot of ways to improve, but it was done crude. You lived in a different world than you are now.
Did y'all get presents? If you did?
Yeah, we had a few presents. Yeah, we had a few. Yeah, of course. Remember, money was awful tight.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
And yeah, it was really tight. You know. Wanted to drive a Greyhound. Yeah, but that's what I wanted to do because the Greyhound bus would run up and down 61 highway at that time. But you know, I don't know. I'm glad I drove, because I tell you what, I couldn't have wound up in any better place. It was hard work. It paid well, and I had all the benefits and a pension and all that. And I couldn't ask for my life. It was rough, there's no doubt about that, but I was a rough and tough little boy. You know, I grew up that way. But anyhow, my truck driving years treated me good, and it paid me well, and I got a living standard as a pension and everything. I keep my bills paid. I couldn't ask for any more. 16, I guess it was, because we were married. Yeah. Yeah.
Where did y'all meet?
At Patton Junction down there.
What is that? Patton Junction?
Yeah, that's just a little junction where there's a store. It was a store and a garage there.
And that's where y'all met?
Yeah. And there used to be these old medicine shows. You may see some of them on TV where they're coming around selling you this elixir. Souped up water is all it was. But this guy, him and his wife and a small little girl, he would come and set up shop there. And he'd sell this crazy stuff, you know.
You saw that?
And I saw that. And he would come out and do a little dance, you know. And he'd always come up there and say, my 17-piece Hungarian orchestra just couldn't get here tonight, folks. And then he would tell a few stories and dance a little bit and then sell. You've seen it on TV. These old wagons, but he had an old 30-some model truck with a panel on it, like just an old panel truck. That's where they lived in that thing.
Oh, they actually lived in it.
Yeah, they lived in that thing. And he would set up there at Patton Junction and put on a little show, but that's where I met her. Of course, I knew her from before then. She went to the church up there, Methodist Church. I actually knew her before then. But she went to a different school than I did, so in grade school. So we never went to the same school.
So how old were you when you proposed, and what was her reaction?
Well, let's see. Let me think. My gosh. I want to tell you something. You talk about being wild and crazy and the hormones running with your life.
Wow.
I was married, let's see. I met her when I was about 16, and we was married. I was 17 years old when we got married.
Oh, wow.
And she wasn't much older than that.
So y'all dated about a year?
Yeah, about a year. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you proposed? Well,
yeah, I think. But anyhow, I asked her, and she said, okay.
Just like that.
Yeah.
She was done.
Well,
in your opinion?
Live and let live. You better be patient. You know, patience is a virtue. And taking care of Clara, you know, I want to tell you something. With Alzheimer's patients, if you don't have patience, you better be getting it because you're going to be needing it. Mm-hmm. And you'll apply more psychology than a psychology teacher teaches in a whole year. Yeah. You know, at colleges. Mm-hmm. But I said, you better get some patience, and see. You better have the patience of Job, and the gift of God, and the wisdom of Solomon. You put it all together, and that's what you got to have for. That's what you got to have for a good marriage.
That's gonna be tough for me. Man, you're asking a lot right there.
Honesty. You know.
So they're real honest people.
Oh my, that's the way it was. You know, you didn't have 14,000 lawyers running behind you. If a man's word was good, you took him for it. A handshake, that meant a commitment. A blood brother, you might say you may as well cut blood, as a handshake was the same thing. The sad part about it, we've lost an awful lot of this, what we're talking about. This world I was in, and this world we're in right now, is a sorry mess. Really it is. I mean, I don't know what's brought a transformation so much, but the climate and the people of that era of time. Another thing in the farm where you really stood together, for instance, real quickly, if someone's house burnt or a barn, it did happen, that barn, everybody in the community knew about, hey, we're going to build so-and-so's house back up. You went and done it. This man that I was telling you about, that his son was lost in World War II, his house burnt, and they helped build him back. You know?
Anything else you gathered from your parents that you took in life and was really valuable? Obviously hard work. I mean, they're hard-working people.
Well, that's another thing. You didn't put it this way. If you don't know anything but hard work, when you get out in life, you think that's just the way life is. And I want to tell you something. I was born and raised on a farm, and that was hard work, but that wasn't nothing until I got in that shoe factory.
They got their money out of that shoe factory.
Huh?
They got the money out of it.
Oh, my.
And so you're telling earlier about it was piecemeal. So you got paid by the piece, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Points. Yeah, it was by the piece or by points. Yeah. And if you had to make, it's awful fast. Extremely fast. You wouldn't, if you'd see people working that way today, hey, buddy, you better slow down here a little bit. They'd tell you to slow down. But anyhow, they called it points. They set points on every job. And if you made too many points, they raised it up a little higher. In other words, squeezing you more. And by the way, I worked in the shoe factory, and this heel right in here, a breast guard, and this little with dress shoes, this little point here with leather heels, you know, I clipped that off, bevel corners, and I made something like $20 a week, and that was a 40-hour week. So you see what that is real quick. Yeah. And the salaries at that time was something like $18 to $22 a week, depending on how many points you made and how productive you were and what type of shoes that you was working on a lot.
And so when you were making that, say in your 20s and 30s,
well,
were you, eventually you went to truck driving, that type of thing, but because of the war and the depression and that type of thing, were you kind of holding on to your money?
Oh my, it was, you ain't just kidding. And when we say holding on to your money, you know, $10 or $15, $20, you're holding on to that stuff, you know. But anyhow, I know a shoe factory is hard work, and it shut down for a summer vacation. And after I was there almost 3 years, and I went to work at a Western Auto store. And there's where I was working as a salesman, and I was telling you earlier about the cash register stopping up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
that had a major impact. I mean,
yeah.
to this day,
And years later, this man eventually, who owned the Western Auto Store, moved to Piedmont, and I wanted to touch base with him and talk to him a little bit, but it was too late. He done passed away. I'm sure he'd have remembered the situation, because his co-worker, he remembered it real well. He remembered the situation. And can you imagine how they had me branded? Pitiful. Hey,
You're the newest.
And I'm innocent, and when you're innocent, you're not thinking like a guilty person. So I'm not even thinking that, hey, maybe he thinks I'm taking that money. Practically almost every morning, hey, the cash register was short again. Huh? Didn't mean anything to me. You know? Because I knew I didn't have nothing to do with it. You know? I had a clean conscience, so I didn't know nothing about it. Now, if I'd been stealing it, I would know something about it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess just a good old boy trying to get through life.